Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel where we simplify complex legal cases into easy to understand concepts. Today we are looking at an interesting Singapore High Court case, Fong Whye Koon and Chan Ah Thong, which highlights the doctrine of unconscionable bargains. This case serves as a stark reminder that not all contracts are enforceable, especially when fairness and justice are at stake. This case revolves around a dispute over the sale of a property between an elderly illiterate woman and a buyer who insisted on enforcing the contract. The plaintiff, Mr. Fong Whye Koon, sought specific performance of a contract for the purchase of a flat from the defendant, Madam Chan Ah Thong, an 84-year-old illiterate woman in poor health. Madam Chan had wanted to sell her flat and moved to China to live with relatives. Another person, a friend who was acting as the middleman, told her that the property was worth $245,000 and requested for a $5,000 commission for brokering the sale. Mr. Fong immediately agreed to buy the flat for $245,000 without bargaining. The deal was formalized with an option to purchase, which Mr. Fong exercised, paying 10% of the purchase price. However, completion of the sale was delayed due to technical issues with the property title. Madam Chan then changed her mind about selling, realizing that she did not have alternative accommodation. And upon further inquiry, she discovered that the actual market value of her flat at the time of sale was $390,000, meaning she had grossly undervalued the property by $145,000. When Madam Chan refused to proceed with the sale, Mr. Fong sued her, seeking specific performance, essentially asking the court to force her to complete the sale of the property. The key question before the court was whether the contract should be enforced or whether it was an unfair and unconscionable transaction that equity should not allow. The court had to determine two key issues. The first was whether this was an unconscionable bargain and whether the contract could be considered constructive fraud because the circumstances under which it was made. The second issue was whether specific performance should be granted, meaning whether the court should force Madam Chan to complete the sale. Mr. Fong argued that mere undervaluation of the property was not enough to refuse specific performance. He pointed out that Madam Chan was represented by lawyers throughout the transaction and that she had not raised any objections for 16 months, even asking for extensions to complete the sale. He also argued that if she was misled, she should take action against her friend, the middleman, and not against him. Madam Chan, on the other hand, argued that the contract was an unconscionable bargain as she was elderly, illiterate, and in poor health when she signed it. She pointed out that the price was a gross undervalue and that she had no independent advice at the time. Madam Chan's lawyers argued that Mr. Fong had taken advantage of her vulnerability, making the contract fundamentally unfair. The court ruled in favor of Madam Chan and dismissed Mr. Fong's claim. It found that the gross undervaluation raised a presumption of fraud. The doctrine of unconscionable bargain does not require active deceit. It can arise when one party takes advantage of another person's weakness. The court determined that Madam Chan's circumstances placed her in a position of significant disadvantage as she was elderly, illiterate, ill, and unaware of the true value of her property. The burden was therefore on Mr. Fong to prove that the transaction was fair and reasonable, but he failed to do so. The court noted that he remained silent about the circumstances, including his knowledge of the true property value. Since Madam Chan had raised a prima facie case of fraud, it was unjust to force her to sell. As such, specific performance was denied. Mr. Fong then requested damages if specific performance was refused by the court, but the court also denied this. Given that the very validity of the contract was in doubt, the court refused to award him any compensation. In the end, the court prevented a potential injustice by refusing to enforce a contract made under circumstances of inequality and unfairness. This case serves as a reminder that contracts are not just about written agreements, but about fairness and justice. Even if a contract is legally valid, Equity may intervene to prevent the enforcement of agreements that offend conscience. From a broader perspective, this case reflects a profound truth. Attachment to gain can cloud judgment, and the pursuit of self-interest at the expense of another's suffering often leads to legal and moral consequences. As we navigate life, it is worth considering whether our actions create harmony or suffering for other people. Sometimes, letting go of what we desire is not a loss, but a path to greater wisdom and peace. That's it for today's case breakdown. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.